My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old. On my 32nd birthday, as I was frosting the 100th cake of the day, my parents stood out front and laughed. They were laughing with a regular customer, saying I was married to my work as if it were a punchline. What they didn't know was that in just a few hours, an email would land in their inbox, confirming the sale of their struggling bakery. And the anonymous buyer, the person who was about to become their new boss, was me. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button, because the story of how I reclaimed my legacy might just give you a little inspiration. The smell of rising yeast, caramelized sugar, and melting chocolate are my earliest memories. Heritage Bakes, the family bakery, wasn't just a family business. It was my entire world, built by my grandfather, Arthur. He was a man with hands calloused from flour, but a heart as soft as a fresh brioche. He taught me the language of the kitchen, the sharp crack of a perfect sugar crust, the gentle sigh of proofing dough, the deep, nutty aroma of a sourdough starter at its peak. "Baking isn't a formula, Clara," he'd say, dusting flour off my apron. "It's a feeling. You have to put a piece of your soul into it." And I did, my whole life. When he passed away 10 years ago, he left the bakery to my parents, Richard and Susan, trusting they would cherish his legacy. Instead, they treated it like a gilded burden. My father, a retired accountant, saw only the numbers and they were getting worse. My mother, who'd never worked a day in her life, enjoyed the title of bakery owner, without ever wanting to get dough on her hands. The real weight of keeping Heritage Bakes alive fell squarely on my shoulders. I'd given up an art scholarship to go to culinary school, returning home immediately after graduation to work full-time. My salary was minimal, but I was promised that one day, the bakery would be mine. That promise began to feel hollow when my younger brother Leo decided the life of a content creator wasn't as stable as he'd thought. Leo is 2 years my junior, the golden child. A boy blessed with a charming smile and a talent for evading responsibility. While I was up at 4 a.m. mixing starters, Leo would sleep until noon. While I was testing new recipes to bring in customers, Leo was convincing my parents to fund his get-rich-quick schemes, a failed podcast, a clothing line that was never produced. Each of his failures was bankrolled by my parents, pulled from the bakery's dwindling revenue. The injustice wasn't just financial. It was woven into the very fabric of how they saw us. 3 years ago, I had finally saved enough for a 1-week vacation, my first in 5 years. I'd booked a small cabin by a lake. 2 days before I was set to leave, Leo, who was supposed to be managing the front of the house, forgot to place our weekly dairy order. A massive, catastrophic mistake. I found out at 5 a.m. on a Friday when I had no butter, no cream, no milk. Instead of letting me go on my well-deserved break, my parents begged me to stay and fix it. "We can't manage without you, dear," my mother had pleaded. I canceled my trip. I spent that week making frantic calls and driving all over the state to buy supplies at retail prices just to keep the doors open. Leo got a gentle lecture. I lost my vacation and my non-refundable deposit. This pattern repeated itself. 2 years ago, I developed a recipe for a unique cronut that became a local social media sensation, drawing lines around the block. When a prominent food blogger came to do a feature, my parents pushed Leo forward. "Leo is the creative mind behind our operation," my father said proudly, while I was in the back, covered in flour, trying to produce enough pastries to meet the demand. Leo took all the credit, smiling for the camera and talking about his innovative vision. I never got so much as a thank you. He was the vision, I was just the labor. To them, I was a machine, reliable, efficient, and devoid of feelings. Leo was a dream full of potential, exciting, and worthy of endless investment. They couldn't see that the machine was wearing down and their dream was driving us into the ground. I tried to talk to them, presenting spreadsheets, business plans, ideas to modernize without losing the bakery's soul. Each time I was dismissed. "Don't be so negative, Clara. my father would say, not looking up from his newspaper. "You're doing a fine job with the baking. Just leave the business side to us." But their business side was failing. And when the crash finally came, I thought maybe, finally, they would see my worth. I had no idea that their blindness ran deeper than I ever imagined, and that it was about to lead to a betrayal that even I couldn't have predicted. The storm broke on a damp Tuesday evening in October. The weeks leading up to it had been filled with a low-grade hum of anxiety. I'd noticed my father having hushed phone calls in the office, and my mother poring over bank statements with a worried frown. They would stop talking the moment I entered a room. I knew something was wrong, but they walled me out, treating me like a simple employee instead of family. When they finally called me into the office, the air was thick with manufactured gravity. Leo was slouched in a corner chair, scrolling on his phone, looking more bored than concerned. "We need to talk, Clara," my father began, his voice heavy. He slid a letter across my grandfather's old oak desk. It was from the bank. The words, "Loan default, foreclosure, and liquidation," leaped off the page, each one a punch to the gut. I knew this day was coming. I'd been warning them about it for months. The business loans they'd taken out to fund Leo's failed ventures, combined with their refusal to invest in marketing or equipment upgrades, had created an unavoidable financial catastrophe. I thought this was my moment. This was when they would turn to me. This was when they would say, "Clara, you were right. We need you. Can you save us?" I was ready, a three-point plan already formed in my mind. Instead, my father cleared his throat and said the words that shattered what was left of my naive heart. "The bank has given us an option," he said. "They'll restructure the loan if we can present a convincing new business plan under new ownership." My mother smiled, a shaky, relieved sort of smile. "And we have a plan," she added, looking at Leo with pure adoration. "Leo has a wonderful vision to turn this place into a trendy, experiential hub. He's been talking to some people. It's all about synergy and pivoting the brand." I stared at them, uncomprehending. An experiential hub? We're a bakery. Leo finally looked up from his phone, a smirk on his face. "You don't get it, Clara. Bread is old news. The future is in Instagrammable spaces. We'll have a flower wall, a smoothie bar, and maybe outsource the actual baking to a ghost kitchen." The idea was horrifying, an insult to everything my grandfather had built. "And who would be running this experiential hub?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We're selling the bakery to Leo," my father announced, as if it were the most brilliant solution in the world. "For $1. That will satisfy the bank's requirement for new ownership. He'll be the new CEO. This is business, dear," my mother added, patting my hand as if I were a child. "It's a bit complicated, but this is the best path forward." "And what's my role in this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, you'll still be here, of course," my mother said cheerfully. "You'll be our head pastry chef. Leo will need someone reliable in the back to ensure quality. Nothing will change for you. Nothing would change. Except I, the one who had dedicated my life to this place, would now be working for my brother, who didn't know the difference between yeast and baking powder. Except my grandfather's legacy would be turned into a trendy gimmick. Except the promise that the bakery would one day be mine had been tossed aside like stale bread. I didn't say anything. I just stood up and walked out of the office, Leo's snicker echoing behind me. As I stepped into the kitchen, which still smelled faintly of my grandfather's sourdough, I felt a cold clarity wash over me. They didn't just undervalue me. They didn't even see me. To them, I was part of the equipment, a reliable stand mixer that would always be there to do the heavy lifting. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my small apartment above the bakery and made a decision. They were wrong to think I was just part of the equipment. They had forgotten I was Arthur's granddaughter, and I had inherited more than just his recipes. I had inherited his grit. I wouldn't let my grandfather's legacy crumble without a fight. I just didn't know that the fight was about to begin so soon, and that it would get far uglier than I could possibly imagine. In the weeks that followed, Leo's vision began to take shape, and it was a waking nightmare. He paraded through the bakery like a petty king, pointing and making proclamations. The first thing he did was change our long-standing suppliers for flour and butter, men my grandfather had worked with for 40 years, in favor of a cheaper, lower-grade option he found online. "It's all about optimizing margins, Clara," he told me condescendingly when I protested, showing him the limp, greasy croissants the new ingredients produced. "You're stuck in the past." My parents agreed. "Give Leo a chance, dear," my mother said. "Change is good sometimes." The customers noticed the difference. The complaints started trickling in. One elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, who had bought her sourdough here every week for 30 years, brought her loaf back. "This isn't Arthur's bread, Clara," she said, her eyes sad. "It breaks my heart. It broke mine too." Next came the rebranding. Leo hired a graphic designer friend of his for an exorbitant fee to create a new logo. The old one, a classic image of a rolling pin and a stalk of wheat, was replaced by a tacky pink neon font that was hard to read. He had the warm, oak-paneled storefront painted a garish mint green and installed flashing LED lights in the window. The bakery began to look more like a nightclub than a comforting haven. Every time I voiced my concern that we were alienating our loyal, decades-long customer base, I was called resistant to change, or jealous. "You just can't handle that I'm succeeding where you failed to innovate," Leo told me during a staff meeting, humiliating me in front of my team. My attempts to speak reason were met with a wall of gaslighting. I prepared a 10-page presentation, complete with charts and figures, showing the 20% drop in revenue since Leo had started implementing his changes. I scheduled a formal meeting with my parents and Leo. I presented my data calmly and professionally. When I was finished, my father looked at me with disappointment. "Clara," he said, his voice laced with feigned hurt, "I know this is hard for you. You're used to calling the shots. But you have to understand, being jealous of your brother's success isn't going to help anyone." My mother nodded in agreement. "Leo is trying his best, dear. He has so much pressure on him now. You should be supporting him, not trying to sabotage him." They had twisted my valid concerns into a petty sibling rivalry. I felt like I was screaming into a void. In the midst of all this, I found an unlikely ally. Mr. Harrison, a retired entrepreneur and one of my grandfather's closest friends, stopped by the bakery one day. He hadn't been in since the new logo went up. He bought a loaf of sourdough, took one bite, and the look on his face said everything. I invited him into the office, and, in a moment of weakness, told him everything: the plan to sell to Leo, the disastrous changes, the way I was being pushed out. Mr. Harrison listened patiently, his sharp eyes missing nothing. When I was done, he shook his head. "Arthur always said your hands had the magic, not your parents' checkbook," he said softly. "They're not just blind, Clara. They're deliberately writing you out of your own legacy. You are the only one who carries Arthur's spirit. You can't let them do this." His words were like water in a desert. For the first time, I felt seen. "But what can I do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "They won't listen to me." "Then make them listen," Mr. Harrison said, a glint in his eye. "Not with words, but with actions. Sometimes, the best way to show people your value is to let them experience life without you." That advice planted a seed in my mind, but it was the next incident that made it sprout into a plan of action. One Friday afternoon, Leo stormed into the kitchen, his face flushed. "Where is the wedding cake order for tomorrow?" he demanded. I pointed to the neatly stacked boxes on a rack. "It's right there, ready for delivery." He looked at the boxes, then at me. No, the client just called. They changed their minds. They want a naked cake with fresh flowers, not this buttercream thing." I looked at him, stunned. "Leo, this order was confirmed 2 months ago. I reconfirmed with the bride last week. There is no possible way I can remake an entire wedding cake by tomorrow morning. Then figure it out, he snarled. I'm the boss here. You'll do what I say. He turned to my father, who had followed him into the kitchen. See, Dad? This is the attitude I have to deal with. She's completely uncooperative. Instead of defending me, instead of asking Leo why there was a last-minute mix-up, my father turned to me. Clara, for God's sake, stop being so difficult. Just give the customer what they want. The customer doesn't want this, I said, my voice trembling with rage. Leo messed up. He probably forgot to note the change or mixed up the orders. Don't blame your brother, my mother interjected, appearing out of nowhere. Just fix it. It's what you do. They left, leaving me alone in the kitchen with a perfect wedding cake that was now deemed wrong. I stood there in the silence, the tick-tock of the wall clock counting down my sanity. I realized nothing would ever change. They would always protect him. They would always blame me. I had spent my life trying to be perfect for them, and it still wasn't enough. I looked at the cake, and then I looked at my reflection in the stainless steel oven door, tired, covered in flour, and utterly alone. That's when I knew I couldn't fix this. Not the cake, but my family. I had to save myself, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. The final straw wasn't a loud explosion, but a quiet laugh. It was my 32nd birthday. It fell on a Saturday, our busiest day of the week, and I knew I wouldn't get the day off. I wasn't expecting a party or lavish gifts. Maybe a simple, happy birthday. Maybe a small cupcake with a single candle. That's all I hoped for. The day started at 4 a.m. as always. It was worse than usual, however. The night before, Leo had decided to run a viral marketing campaign he saw on TikTok, offering a free croissant to the first 50 customers. He hadn't told me, nor had he ordered extra ingredients. I arrived to find we were almost out of flour and butter, with a line already forming outside. I spent the morning scrambling, making emergency calls to suppliers and paying extra for immediate delivery. The entire morning was a chaotic blur of adrenaline and stress, and I worked at a frantic pace just to keep up. By midday, I was exhausted. The ache in my lower back was a constant throb, and I had flour in my hair and under my fingernails. I hadn't had time to eat breakfast, and a dull headache was forming behind my temples. That's when my parents arrived, not to help, but to check on the cash flow. They were with Leo, who was bragging about the success of his campaign. See? He said, gesturing to the crowd. This is how you get the youth demographic in. My dad clapped him on the shoulder. Good work, son. This is exactly the kind of energy this place needs. They were completely oblivious to the fact that his energy had cost me my sanity. I was in the back, my hands deep in cookie dough, when Mrs. Peterson, a loyal customer who'd been coming since I was a little girl, peeked into the kitchen. Happy birthday, dear, she said, pressing a small card into my hand. I didn't want to bother you, but I just wanted to make sure someone remembered. Tears welled in my eyes. That small piece of paper felt heavier and more valuable than the entire day's earnings. A stranger had remembered, while my own family had not. The defining moment came about an hour later. I was at the front counter, boxing a large order, while my parents were chatting with another couple, friends of theirs. Clara looks exhausted, the woman said with a note of concern. My mother laughed, a light, dismissive sound. Oh, she's always like this. Married to her work, you know. We don't know what we'd do without her. Then my father added, and it was the line that broke everything. Yeah, he said with a chuckle. We keep joking that we should start charging her rent for the bed she never sleeps in. They laughed. All four of them. A light social laugh at my dedication, at my sacrifice. The sound seemed to slow down, to amplify in the air until it was all I could hear. It severed the last, frayed thread that connected me to the daughter I used to be, the one who kept hoping they would see her. They had turned my hard work, the very thing keeping their business afloat, into a punchline. In that moment, I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't a person. I was a joke. An anecdote to be told at cocktail parties. All the years of anger, frustration, and hurt coalesced into a single cold point of clarity. Mr. Harrison was right. I had to let them experience life without me. I finished boxing the order, handing it to the customer with a smile I didn't feel. Then, I untied my flour-dusted apron, the one my grandfather had given me. I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. I walked out from behind the counter, past my parents and their laughing friends, without a word. I walked up the stairs to my apartment. Their laughter died as I passed. I could feel their eyes on my back, confusion setting in. But I didn't look back. I was done looking back. I knew this was the last time I would ever leave that bakery as an employee. The next time I walked through those doors, it would be as the owner. That night, in the silence of my apartment, I no longer felt angry. That emotion had burned itself out, leaving only a cold, hard purpose. I didn't cry. Instead, I worked. I opened my laptop and began to execute the plan that had been forming in my mind since my talk with Mr. Harrison. My secret weapon wasn't dramatic. It was something my family had never valued in me: meticulous preparation and quiet patience. For the past 5 years, ever since I realized my parents' promises were empty, I had been living with extreme frugality. While Leo spent their money on gadgets and designer clothes, I had saved every penny. Every dollar saved was another brick in the wall of my future independence. I took on extra catering jobs on the weekends, sold specialty baked goods to local cafes on the side, and invested wisely with guidance from a friend in finance. My parents thought I had no social life. The truth was, I was building a freedom fund. It wasn't a fortune by world standards, but it was a substantial sum enough to be the foundation for what was to come. My second, and more crucial, weapon was Mr. Harrison. He wasn't just a family friend. He was a sharp businessman who had built and sold 3 successful companies. He understood value, leverage, and strategy. When I called him that evening and said, "I'm ready," I could hear a smile in his voice. "I've been waiting for this call," he said. "Be in my office Monday morning. Bring every financial document from the bakery you can get your hands on." Oh, over the weekend, I discreetly copied documents, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, the bank notices, tax records. Looking at the numbers, the picture was even worse than I thought. They were losing about $5,000 a month, and the outstanding bank loan was nearly $250,000. But I also saw the potential. I saw where costs could be cut, where revenue could be grown, and how to get the bakery back to profitability within 6 months. On Monday morning, I sat across from Mr. Harrison in his elegant home office. He reviewed the documents I'd brought. "The financials are a disaster, but the asset is not," he concluded. "The brand, the location, your grandfather's recipes, those are valuable intangibles. The problem is management." Then, he laid out the plan. It was both audacious and brilliantly simple. "You're not going to confront them," he said. "You are going to solve their problem in a way they can't refuse." The plan was this. Mr. Harrison would provide the rest of the capital I needed. Together, we would form a limited liability company, a completely anonymous entity. He introduced me to his lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Davenport, who specialized in business acquisitions. Miss Davenport had the LLC set up for us within 24 hours. Legacy Bakers Group, LLC. The name was a silent tribute to my grandfather. "This isn't personal, Miss Evans," she told me, her voice firm and reassuring. "This is business, and you're about to make a very good business decision." Then Miss Davenport, on behalf of Legacy Bakers Group, drafted a formal offer. The offer was to acquire the entire Heritage Bakes business, including the name, assets, and recipes. Most importantly, the offer included the assumption of their entire outstanding business debt. For my parents, this would be a golden ticket. They would be free of their $250,000 liability. And on top of that, we offered a cash payment of $50,000 for their goodwill. It was a golden parachute they didn't know they needed. It was enough for them to retire comfortably, and enough to soothe their egos that they had sold the business rather than letting it go into foreclosure. The offer was designed to be irresistible. For the next few days, I worked with Miss Davenport and Mr. Harrison, refining the details. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Part of me felt guilty for moving behind my family's back, but a larger part of me felt empowered. For the first time, I wasn't asking for a seat at the table. I was buying the whole table. "Remember, Clara," Mr. Harrison told me the night before we sent the offer, "you're not taking anything from them. You're saving your grandfather's legacy from their bad decisions. You are buying your own future." On Friday, exactly 1 week after my forgotten birthday, Miss Davenport emailed the official offer to my father. I had been out of work all week, claiming I had the flu. The truth was, I couldn't stand to be in the same building as them, pretending everything was normal. I spent the day waiting, my heart pounding every time my phone buzzed. Finally, around 4 p.m., my father called. His voice was electric with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Clara, you're not going to believe this. A miracle has happened. Some investment group has offered to buy the bakery. They're going to pay off all our debt. We're saved." I closed my eyes, taking a slow, deep breath. "That's wonderful news, Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "We're having a family meeting on Sunday night to discuss the details," he said. "You have to be there. We're going to celebrate our new future." "Oh, I'll be there," I said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As I hung up the phone, I knew the confrontation I had both dreaded and craved was set. The stage was now set. Sunday evening arrived with a tense stillness. I walked into my parents' living room, a space that had become foreign territory to me. The air was thick with a false sense of relief. My father was pacing, a wide grin plastered on his face. My mother was pouring champagne into crystal flutes they only used on special occasions. Leo was sprawled on the couch, already dreaming of how he'd spend the leftover money. He looked up as I entered. "Hey, sis," he said smugly. "Heard the good news? My plan worked. My vision attracted the big-time investors." I just nodded, taking a seat in the armchair across from them. I placed my leather briefcase, the one Miss Davenport had given me, on the floor beside me. I felt a strange sense of calm, the calm of someone who knows all the cards being played. "So, who is this investment group?" I asked, my tone even. "We're not sure," my father said, handing me a glass of champagne, which I politely declined. "It's all through their lawyer. Very professional. They call themselves Legacy Bakers Group. Nice name, isn't it? They obviously respect the history of the place." "Yes," I said. "They do. The best part is," my mother chimed in, "not only are they covering the debt, but they're giving us $50,000 in cash. We can travel. And of course, we'll set aside a good portion for Leo to start his next venture." "And what about Clara?" I asked, referring to myself in the third person. My father patted my hand. "Don't you worry, sweetheart. Their lawyers said they want to retain key staff. As long as you make a good impression on the new owners, I'm sure you'll have a job." There it was. The moment. The utter lack of awareness. The absolute self-satisfaction. They had sold my future and were now offering me a chance to audition for it. I took a deep breath. "I've seen the offer," I said. "It's very thorough." "How could you have seen it?" Leo asked, sitting up straight. "Dad just got it on Friday." "Because I helped draft it," I said, my voice clear and firm. A silence fell over the room. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me, confusion creeping into their features. I reached down and opened my briefcase. I pulled out a professionally bound document. "Legacy Bakers Group, LLC was formed last Tuesday," I said, sliding a copy of the Articles of Incorporation across the coffee table. "It's registered right here in this state." My father picked up the paper, squinting at it. "So what? That's just paperwork." "It is," I said. "And this is the company's operating agreement." I slid another stack of papers over. It lists the sole managing member and 100% owner of the company. My father picked up the second paper. My mother and Leo got up to look over his shoulder. I watched my father's face as he read. I saw his eyes widen in disbelief. I saw the color drain from his cheeks. I saw his hand begin to tremble. He looked up, his eyes locked on mine, filled with utter shock. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." "What is it, Dad?" Leo asked impatiently, snatching the paper from his hand. He read it, then read it again. His smug expression curdled into a mask of angry confusion. "What the hell is this? It says, Clara Evans." "That's right," I said, finally standing up, feeling taller in this room than I ever had before. "Legacy Bakers Group is me. The offer to buy the bakery, to pay off your debt, and to give you $50,000 that came from me." My mother sank onto the couch, a hand flying to her mouth. "But how? The money?" "I saved," I said, "for years. And I have a business partner who believes in me, even when my own family didn't." "This is a joke," Leo sputtered. "This is some kind of scam." "It's perfectly legal," I said. "Your own lawyer can confirm it. The offer is real. The financing is secure. All you have to do is sign the sale papers." My father finally found his voice, and it was filled with betrayed rage. "You did this behind our backs? You conspired against your own family?" "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady now. "I saved this family. I saved Grandfather's legacy. The debt I'm assuming was created by your bad decisions and Leo's failed ideas. The $50,000 I'm giving you is from my own savings. I did this because I love that bakery more than anyone in this room. And I was not going to stand by and watch you hand it over to the person who would destroy it." I turned to Leo. "You don't have a vision. You have fads. You would have run that bakery into the ground in 6 months. You have no right," he yelled. "I have every right," I said, my voice ice cold, "because I'm the only one who has ever put in the work. I have put my sweat, my tears, and my entire life into that place while you were chasing fantasies. While you were laughing at me on my birthday, I was working to save your future. So, here is the deal. You sign the papers, you take the money, and the freedom from debt. I take over the bakery. Leo, you are free to pursue your experiential hub somewhere else." "You can't kick your brother out," my mother sobbed. "You can't do this to us." "I'm not doing this to you," I said. "I'm doing this for me. For the first time ever. You have 24 hours to accept the offer. If you don't, I will withdraw it, and you can deal with the bank on your own. The choice is yours." I picked up my briefcase and walked to the door. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. As I put my hand on the doorknob, I turned back one last time. "Oh, and Leo," I said, "about being the new CEO. Good luck finding a new head baker." Then I walked out, closing the door behind me on the ruins of their old world. Stepping out of that house and into the cool night air felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten what it was like to be without it. I didn't go back to the apartment above the bakery. Instead, I drove to a small hotel I had pre-booked, a small act of my newfound independence. That night, for the first time in years, I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, at 10 a.m., Miss Davenport called. "They signed," she said. "Their lawyer just sent over the executed documents. Congratulations, Miss Evans. You are officially the owner of Heritage Bakes." A wave of relief washed over me so powerfully I had to sit down. It was done. Or rather, it was just beginning. I spent the rest of the day working with Miss Davenport and Mr. Harrison to finalize the transfer. My parents had accepted the money and signed away the ownership without another word. Their silence was its own answer. I received no calls, no texts. It was as if, after I revealed myself as the one in control, I had ceased to exist for them. It hurt, but it was also a confirmation that I had done the right thing. The following day, I walked into the bakery. This time, not through the back door at 4 a.m., but through the front door at 9 a.m., with a new set of keys in my hand. The staff, who had been told of an ownership change, were gathered nervously in the kitchen. When they saw me, there was a moment of confused silence. Maria, our cake decorator who had been here for almost 20 years, was the first to speak. "Clara, what's going on? Your parents said they sold." "They did," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "They sold it to me." The relief and joy in the room were almost palpable. No one had liked Leo's changes or the way my parents had managed the place. They had stayed out of loyalty to my grandfather's memory, and to me. Immediately, we got to work. My first act was to call our old suppliers and reorder the high-quality flour and butter. My second was to take down the garish pink neon sign. It felt glorious. Leo had cleared his personal items out of the office the night before. He'd left a single sticky note on the desk. "You'll regret this." I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. My parents were gone, too. The house I grew up in, now a silent space. I knew they were facing a new reality, one where they no longer had a business to complain about and no longer had a daughter to take for granted. In those first few weeks, I worked tirelessly, but it was a different kind of tired. It was the exhaustion of building, not of bracing. With Mr. Harrison's guidance, I restructured the finances, created a new marketing plan focused on quality and heritage, and most importantly, I empowered my team. I gave everyone raises and implemented a profit-sharing program. For the first time, they felt valued, and it showed in their work. The old customers started coming back, drawn in by word of mouth that the old bakery was back. I felt a freedom I had never known. I could make decisions without needing approval. I could test new recipes without being mocked. I could run this place the way I knew my grandfather would have been proud of. Sometimes, late at night, when I was alone in the kitchen, the silence would feel heavy. I would miss my family, or at least the idea of family I once had. But then I would look around at the walls I had fought for, and the loneliness would be replaced by a deep sense of peace. This was my home, and this time, no one could take it away from me. 10 months can change everything. The bakery, which I'd renamed Arthur's Bakes in honor of my grandfather, wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The return to quality ingredients and a focus on classic recipes, mixed with a few new creations of my own, was a wild success. We were featured in the local paper and a prestigious food magazine. Profits were up 50%, and I had been able to pay Mr. Harrison back his entire investment 3 years ahead of schedule. More importantly, the bakery was once again a community hub, a warm, welcoming place where people came not just for bread, but for connection. My personal life had blossomed as well. I hired an assistant manager, which allowed me to have real weekends off for the first time in my adult life. I started taking a pottery class, rediscovering the artistic side of myself I'd long since abandoned. I traveled. I went to Paris for 2 weeks, not to work, but just to wander through museums, sit in cafes, and eat pastries. I felt like I was breathing for the first time in a decade. And what of my family? Their fate was a lesson in natural consequences. Leo, with the money my parents had given him, tried to launch his experiential hub. He leased an expensive space, bought trendy furniture, and opened with a massive party. It closed in 4 months. He had burned through all the money, with no real business plan beyond empty buzzwords. The last I heard, he had moved in with a friend and was working a part-time delivery job. He never spoke to me. My parents had a difficult adjustment. They did their traveling, but they soon discovered that travel couldn't fill the void left by a lack of purpose. Without a bakery to manage, or mismanage, and no daughter to lean on, they were left with each other and their choices. The silence between us lasted for nearly 6 months. It was my father who broke it. He showed up at the bakery one Tuesday afternoon, looking older and thinner. He didn't say anything at first, just walked around, looking at the display cases filled with pastries he recognized from his own childhood. Finally, he came to the counter where I was working. "It looks just like it did when my father ran it," he said, his voice hoarse. "Only better." "Thanks, Dad," I said. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said, looking me directly in the eye, and I saw the sincerity there. "I was blind. I was proud. I took you for granted, and I was wrong. You are his real legacy, not this building. It was always you." It was the hardest and most healing conversation of my life. Our relationship didn't go back to the way it was. It became something new, something built on a grudging but growing respect. He started stopping by once a week, not as a boss, but as a father, just to have a coffee and talk. My mother took longer. Her pride had been deeply wounded. But after seeing my father begin to rebuild his relationship with me, she started making her own tentative steps. It started with texts, then short phone calls. Finally, she came into the bakery. She didn't apologize with words like my father did, but she did it in her own way. She bought a dozen croissants, paid full price, and told me, "These are the best in town." For her, it was an admission. We are slowly, carefully, finding a new normal, one with clear boundaries. They no longer offer unsolicited business advice, and I no longer seek their approval. We are a family under repair, and that's okay. I learned that sometimes you have to completely break something down before you can build it back stronger. Standing in my bustling bakery, I realized I hadn't just bought a business. I had bought myself back. Looking back on this journey, the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about business or baking. It was about worth. For years, I had allowed my family to define my value. I accepted their low pay, their empty promises, and their disrespect because a part of me believed that's all I deserved. I thought my hard work and sacrifice would one day be recognized. But the truth is, you cannot expect other people to see your value if you don't claim it for yourself first. The act of buying the bakery wasn't just a smart business move, it was a declaration. It was me saying, "My work has value, my vision has value, I have value." And the moment I stopped waiting for their permission to succeed and started creating my own path, everything changed. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals are the very catalysts we need to break free from toxic patterns and reclaim our own lives. I learned that family isn't always who understands you best. Sometimes, it's the family you choose, like Mr. Harrison, my loyal staff, the friends who supported me that truly lifts you up. My grandfather's real legacy wasn't just the recipes written on old index cards. It was the lesson that passion, integrity, and resilience are the most important ingredients, not just in baking, but in life. Have you ever had to fight to prove your worth to the people who should have seen it all along? Have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect your dreams from your own loved ones? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of overcoming challenges. Remember to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that they have the right to write their own recipe for success. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to be the owner of your own legacy.